People are beginning to trickle in. So. Welcome. We will get started at the top of the hour. We're just letting folks in now.
I feel like I'm really close.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're going to get started right at 3. Hi, welcome attendees. We're going to get started in just a minute here. We're waiting to let people in, and then we'll get started really soon. I can hear the chimes on Old Mains. That means it's 1 till 3. It's always a minute early.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this session, and the recordings for all of the sessions will be available in Hoover for the next 3 months. If you want to go back and view some of the sessions that you weren't able to see today, because we have tracks. My name is Melissa Johnson. I'm an Associate Vice Provost and Associate Dean in the Office of Undergraduate Education. And I'm delighted to be spending the day here today with you all talking about first-gen student success. This is very near and dear to my heart. Fatima and I are going to be sharing facilitator duties today for this session. We are in a Zoom webinar format, which means that your microphones and cameras are turned off, and there is no chat available in the Zoom. We will, however, have both a chat and a Q&A available through the Hoover platform. So if you want to make sure that you've got that open as well, so that you can put your questions and comments in there. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the webinar today, and we will be using it to address questions at the end. If you do need the closed captioning, it should be available at the bottom of your screen. You can click on Show Captions, and it will show you the closed captioning. Let me see if I'm making sure I'm not forgetting anything from the list of things I'm supposed to tell you. That was it. So we are delighted today to be hosting Millie Rodriguez in this session, who is our presenter. And many of you may know Millie, who has been at Penn State for a lot of her history. She's an alum of Penn State as an undergrad, and now she's currently in the PhD program in the College of Education, but she also has worked in our Multicultural Resource Center here at UP, and she presented last year. So you may have had the pleasure of seeing her presentation from last year. And with that, I will turn it over to Millie.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for visiting with me today. And I want to just say, I'm really excited about this presentation. You all are my guinea pigs, so I just hope that you bear with me, and please put as many questions as you think of in the chat or the question and answer, and we'll get to them at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the title of my talk today is Using Cultural Responsiveness at the Intersection of Twice Exceptionality and First-Gen Status. And the reason I chose that is all about me. It's my positionality. So to know why I'm talking about this, I'm going to give some background information about myself that will help you understand why this is so important and such a passion for me. So as Melissa mentioned, I completed my undergrad here at Penn State University Park. I received my Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, English and Communications. I taught high school English, middle and high school English for 14 years. During that time, I also received my Master of Science in Education, and I received that in Curriculum and Instruction from the University of Scranton. And that wasn't enough for me. And it's funny too, because I remember telling my mom when I was an undergrad, I just want to be a perpetual learner. I just want to be a perpetual student. And so after my master's, it wasn't enough. I saw that Penn State also offered a post-baccalaureate certificate in educating individuals with autism. And I thought, wow, that's going to pair really well with my curriculum and instruction degree, because I wanted to support students with autism. And now I am pursuing my PhD in special education. And that leads me to my why. Some of you who know me personally know that I have a child with autism, and their experience in high school and transition to college was not successful. They are back in school, so they are taking classes at Penn State World Campus. And so that is a great thing, but the initial transition from high school to college wasn't that great. And throw in the pandemic, it just was not a good mix. So that is my why. My degree and my PhD will be looking at ways to support students who are twice exceptional transition to college. And where does that start? Does it start in elementary, middle, high school? And if it didn't start there, how can personnel, professional staff at higher ed institutions support those students? And, not just highlighting my middle child who has autism, but also my oldest and my youngest. They are the reason that I am who I am. My daughter was, I remember 15 years ago, about the one who taught me all, I grew up in New York, the New York City, the place where everybody comes from a diverse background, but she's the one who taught me at a young age to really be sensitive to others. And, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but I the way I grew up, I felt like I was very diverse thinking, but she helped shine a light on the areas of my bias. And then my youngest taught me how to be a mom and how to treat everybody differently. Not everybody learns the same, not everybody receives information the same. So I just want to take a minute to thank them. And so that's all about me. That's my position. That's where I'm coming from when I'm going into my PhD program in special education, focusing on twice exceptional students. Oops, I forgot to delete that slide, but I was also a first-gen student. So that really also informs my position. So the first part I wanted to talk about was culturally responsive pedagogy, which is, some of you may be familiar with these names, may be familiar with the pedagogy or culturally responsive teaching. And what I want to do is tie it to twice exceptionality and supporting students at the college level. And so Gloria Ladson-Billings had 3 goals with her. Well, let me take a step back. Gloria Ladson-Billings was the pioneer in culturally responsive pedagogy. And so it was rooted in education. The 3 goals were academic success, positive ethnic cultural identities, while also achieving academically, and for students to recognize, understand, and critique well, students and educators to recognize, understand, and critique current and social inequalities. Geneva Gay is building on Gloria Letts and Billings' 3 goals and coined the term culturally responsive teaching, which just meant that, not just turning the focus, sorry, take another step back, not just looking at students and their diverse backgrounds, but also focusing a stronger focus on teacher pre-service and practice. And so what that means is that the students who are going to college to be teachers, what we know across the country is that about 77% of the teachers earning degrees in education are young white women. And they are not only going to teach young white women. Many of them actually end up in more urban or very different setting than where they grew up. And so Geneva Gay said, we need to prepare these teachers to be culturally sensitive. And the focus, again, teacher pre-service, practice, especially as it relates to culturally and linguistically diverse students. So let's see. Sorry, I'm missing my place right now. She also called on educators to make positive changes on multiple levels, including instructional techniques, prior experiences, student-teacher relationships, classroom climate, and especially when it comes to special educators, bringing parents in and not just with a smile, but learning more about the culture so that the families feel welcomed into that space. Django Paris is one of the more recent researchers on culturally responsive pedagogy and was thinking more about not how can we meet the students where they are, not only how can we understand or try to understand their ethnic and cultural identities, but how can we build on that in the classroom and sustain it over time? How do we weave those identities into teacher practice? And the number one thing throughout is strength, that the pedagogy comes from a strengths-based versus a deficit model. Let's build on the student's strengths. So again, just this foundation of learning about the families, learning about the student, meeting them where they are, and then using that information to build the student up. So I recognize that not everybody understands or knows, maybe have heard of twice exceptionality, but not 100% know exactly what it means. And so I offer this definition here from the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which also needs a change of a name. So twice exceptionality refers to students who are identified as gifted and talented and who also exhibit one or more of the special education categories, excluding cognitive disability. So cognitive disabilities meaning intellectual disability, defined by individuals with the Disabilities Education Act or IDEA, or receive a diagnosis of special needs based on the American Psychiatric Association's DSM-5. So you can see here in the small print, the federal government defined giftedness as students with high achievement capability in areas such as intellectual, creative, artistic, or leadership capacity, or in specific academic fields, and who need services or activities not ordinarily provided by by the school in order to fully develop those capabilities. So I wanted to make sure I included that because a lot of times people understand giftedness to be extreme talent, like Stephen Hawking's, or over a certain IQ level. And initially it was, giftedness was identified as students who achieved 130 on an IQ test, 130 or higher on an IQ test. And we recognize now that basing a label or a talent on one measure is not enough. There needs to be this more robust view of what giftedness is. And so that's where we get that definition from the federal government. Oops, sorry. So twice exceptionality, when we are talking about giftedness and disabilities, we're not talking about physical limitations like vision, vision or blindness, deafness, or a physical barrier. We're talking about the way the mind works, the way the brain is wired. And so these are typically high incidence disabilities that occur, and that just means it occurs often. It's diagnosed often in schools by school psychologists or outside evaluators. And so the disability part is usually one of these definitions or one of these diagnoses. So attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a specific learning disability. Specific learning disability usually revolves around reading, writing, math, reasoning, emotion. So things like dyslexia, dysgraphia, which is difficulty putting letters from their mind onto paper, writing it onto paper. Dyscalculia, meaning students, they can recognize numbers, but they're having a little bit of a difficulty with the math concepts, especially as math gets harder, like multiplication or division, whatever. Auditory processing disorder, that's part of the oral and written language kind of, because it's hearing, but not being able to translate 100% correctly what they're hearing or that comprehension aspect to it. Oral written language processing disorder, nonverbal learning disability. So nonverbal just meaning those cues that we all understand. So when somebody is looking confused, that's a nonverbal. And so some students have difficulty with that. The next bullet, ASD, autism spectrum disorder. And some of you may know that it has changed a little bit. There's no longer in the DSM-5 Asperger's, and ASD is a lot more defined and not as broad as it used to be. And it also is identified by levels of support, which indicate how severe it is. So there's level 1, level 2, level 3, limited, minimal support needed, moderate support needed, or significant support needed. And social pragmatic communication disorder, this is very similar to what people understand as Asperger's. Students who, like those with nonverbal learning disability, have difficulties with social cues and don't understand social interactions as well, or are unable to use their language in social ways. And so for twice exceptional students, strengths are oftentimes that they're academically gifted. One of the stereotypes, though, is that they're academically gifted in STEM areas, and that's not always true. We tend to think of gifted students as always, being science, math, technology, but it's not necessarily true. Some of them have other passions. And another strength is that they have a desire to be more social if they're not already social. And then again, I want to be strengths focused, but it is important to understand what potential barriers exist for students who are transitioning to college as a first-year student, and especially as a first-year, first-gen student. So while they're often academically gifted, academics often poses a potential barrier because they are perfectionists. They sometimes struggle with focus, and they are scared to not do well. Going to college may be the first time that they have ever really been academically challenged. So that is a potential barrier. Socialization is also another potential barrier. So though some of them or a lot of them have the desire to be more social, it's the first exposure, especially if they're first gen, to the college culture. And so we all know the college campus, the college experience, the college culture is so different than the safety of home and the safety of the school that they grew up in for most of their life. And it's a whole new thing. And so they often think that they're ready for college and that they will find their tribe or their group, but it's often very difficult for them to do so. Twice exceptional students are very, very likely to have a comorbid mental health diagnosis. So anxiety, depression, and being a first year, first gen student and causes that to spike. So one of the researchers that I've read about offers some support ideas for twice exceptional students. And so first is safety. And, kind of thinking about this whole thing reminded me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The number one thing for twice exceptional first gen students is the need for safety. They need to know that they're in a place where they're going to be, that their differences are going to be welcomed, and that they're going to feel safety. They're going to feel belonging. Sorry, I'm losing my place. So a psychologically and a physically safe environment. Tolerance for asynchrony, you may pretty much be able to understand that on your own as knowing what asynchronous means. Many of the twice exceptional students, because of their disability diagnosis, have matured at a different rate than their non-neurodivergent peers. And so understanding that some of the students that come to you for help in their first year of college may be a little bit less mature than the typical college student, especially those who are not first gen, who have had parents to talk to and prepare with for the first year of college. So especially for instructors, it's important to know that this asynchrony will cause, well, anybody actually, instructors or professional staff, this will cause a lot of anxiety for the students because they have this, many times they have learned how to be metacognitive, how to have theory of mind, and so they can see the difference between the way they are navigating this new landscape compared to the other people around them, especially in a place like Penn State, where all first year students are required to live on campus. Just kind of being aware of that and offering support with that anxiety. Time is the third factor, and it's critical to student growth. And it doesn't just mean an accommodation of time through student disability resources. Again, it relates to that asynchrony, the maturity level, and the organization. Positive relationships. Thankfully, we have some supports like that on campus and around campus, but everywhere for all students, but especially twice exceptional first-gen students, positive relationships is so important, so critical to retention and to academic success. When they have trusted friends or trusted mentors that they can talk to, classmates, building a social network, when they have time and the ability to do that, they are much more successful. And then again, a strengths-based, talent-focused approach. I think many of us are already in that mindset when we're working with our students, and it's so important to recognize strengths, especially in twice exceptional students who are going to focus more on their deficits, because that many times they have not had the giftedness support in their educational experiences prior to college. They've always just been addressed for their disability. So helping them focus on their strengths is really helpful to them. Another way to support twice exceptional first-gen students and first-gen students in general is to offer compensatory supports and strategies. And that means, how can we logistically support students as they go into their college level classes and are maybe feeling overwhelmed by the syllabus and all the work that they have to do, all the reading they have to do, all the writing they have to do. So identifying compensatory supports that will help them succeed. So study strategies, well, I want to say too that not to support students, first-gen students, especially those who are twice exceptional, don't focus on the content, more focus on the learning and how to learn. So some students have already learned some of these maybe in school because they have had the diagnosis in elementary, middle, or high school. But most often they are just masking. They're doing enough to get by. And so they need explicit instruction on how to do this in a college level course. And so learning how to paraphrase, for example, those of you who are instructors or who have writing requirements from students know that the students a lot of times do not know how to paraphrase. They don't know how to cite. They're plagiarizing without even knowing it. And so that's one way to help them. Also, study strategies. Many students rely on Quizlet. That's just memorization. How are they really taking in this, this information? How are they synthesizing their learning? And I'm realizing I'm running out of time, so I'm going to hurry up. Let's see. So working with the student, if you have the capability to develop a plan to outline study strategies that may be helpful, like how to attack essay questions by, how do you really, what is this question really asking and how am I going to answer it? Multiple choice questions. There are still students who don't know how to do process of elimination, or with multiple choice questions. What I used to do with my students was, okay, take out all the nots or the no's and rephrase it and then find the right answer. And also some students, especially twice exceptional students, because of their comorbid mental health diagnoses, have huge amounts of test anxiety. So how do they talk themselves down from that? And you may have been hearing that ADHD students, giving them extra time on a test is like, that's torture. So maybe not necessarily giving more time, but asking professors to chunk their tests, so that way their students can, okay, here's a chunk, take, like the Pomodoro technique. Here's a chunk, 5 minutes, do the next chunk in the test, 5 minutes, take the next section of the test. So that would be super helpful for students who are gifted and ADHD. Let's see, environmental accommodations, we all know that, cognitive learning strategies. And so a lot of times these bullets are addressed in first year seminars. And I just want to say, it's first year seminars definitely should include these strategies. Making students aware of what resources are available to them at University Park or whatever campus they're attending is great. But again, twice exceptional students have relied on their abilities or masking their disabilities to get by and to succeed. And that doesn't always work. That's not always a successful strategy for them in college. And I also want to highlight self-advocacy. We know that there are parents calling the college, the instructor, the office all the time, and that's going to happen with twice exceptional first gen students as well. And so one of that they have been, and I speak this because I know this is to be true, this was my experience, I was always advocating for my kid. And so when that was one of the things that they did not go into college with, they did not have self-advocacy skills. And so how can, if they're not coming in with it, how can we support them with it? Yeah, so I'm going to go to the next one. And oh, so going back to here, improving executive functioning skills. And that is very common amongst all the different neurodivergent diagnoses, executive functioning skills. And so what does that look like? It looks like the inability to, these are all areas of growth. Planning ability. So plotting a sequence of steps to achieve a goal. And so again, going back to a test that can be chunked, giving different deadlines for students in a sequence for larger projects, making sure that roles and group work are clearly identified, and helping them with time management. Reasoning, and how do you know that a student may have an issue with planning? They may be late to class, they may have poor quality assignments or rushed, they may be late with their assignments or miss exams. Reasoning means that they're able to think through something in a logical way. And so this involves assignments with critical thinking, speculation, internship performance, and the clues for that are trouble connecting previously discussed ideas with current ideas, so that's synthesis, or poor essay answers on an exam. Attentional control, I think that we know, but that's, choosing how one directs their attention. And so maybe they are showing that they're staring off in space, they can't focus, repeating questions, only partially finishing assignments. And that is because they have a hard time with attention. Inhibiting automatic responses. And so I think that you can figure that out too, is like the student who is blurting out a lot, or they're preoccupied with something. So that will affect them with staying on task, as well as attentional control and keeping deadlines. And then their working memory. And that's one area that I personally deal with a lot. And that's the ability to hold and process information. And so that we use that when we are asking students to take notes, when we're asking them to remember things for a test, when we are asking them, when we're talking and then asking for answers in class. And so that is often shown when they're not participating in class, they're having difficulty even expressing what was just said, or if you're like me, then, oh, what was it that I was going to say? Or I can't think of that word. So things like that. Practical application. So that's my number one thing with my degree going forward is how can we apply what we know to help students and to support them. And so I'm really grateful, and I want to make everyone aware of the spaces on campus. I don't know of them all, but I do know of some that are on campus, like the Student Success Center, of course, the Penn State Learning, where they have some tutoring and they help students with writing. Student disability resources. When I was with the MRC, that's what I worked on with students if they needed it, if that's what they wanted to work on. And again, it's really important for students to know about these. And if you know of any, please send it my way so I can make sure that when I interact with students, I can help them with that. As it pertains to professional staff and educators, I want to make sure that I just bring up a few different strategies. And one is linked learning. And basically that just means authentic learning. And so if we are working with students and we want to make these strategies stick, linking it to an authentic learning opportunity is something that can be very helpful. Teaching skills explicitly, like I was talking about earlier, and working with students individually. So one thing I learned, one other office I worked in at Penn State was health promotion and wellness. And one of the things that we learned about was motivational interviewing. It is phenomenal. Asking open-ended questions, affirming the student, repeating what they've said and summarizing. So helping the student understand that and that it goes back to the cultural responsive approach. That really helps you understand the student. And then once you have that information after a conversation using motivational interviewing, you can accommodate their differences in your class or in the environment, or get an idea of how you can support that student better. Let's see. So as far as the student, what we can do to support them and is to help them understand goal setting. It's more than just a bunch of bullets with, oh, hey, this is what I want to do. So goal setting is actually creating a plan. This is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to attack it. I did want to point out too that to-do lists work really well. But again, it doesn't have to be just a bulleted list. And so I think this is mine. So this really works well for me. I can look at and it's right above my laptop. I can look and see what I can wait on, what I need to do, what I'm working on now, and what I'm done. And there's just such a sense of satisfaction moving those Post-its from one column to the next. And you can see here that I have a Student Success Center workshop script in PowerPoint. Another thing students can use is an Eisenhower matrix, and I decided to include that because we have Eisenhower Auditorium at University Park, so I thought it was pretty cool, but I really also like the concept. So having 4 quadrants for a student and helping them understand like what takes priority. Is it important? Is it urgent or not urgent? Is it not important? Is it urgent or not urgent? So if it's important and urgent, then you need to do it. So that's something that can be done now. If it's important and not urgent, you can schedule it, or a student can schedule it and get to it later. If it's not important but urgent, they can delegate to someone else. And if it's not important and not urgent, it can just be deleted. So have an example here. So what they need to do, let's say, for example, responding to a discussion question, finishing their British Lit essay, or filling out their voting ballot. The schedule, having a schedule for going to the DMV or starting their PowerPoint presentation that's due in 2 weeks. Delegating, handing over to someone else, asking the sister to drop off the voting ballot. They don't have to do it themselves. And then delete. And I would put probably there, I don't need to watch The Bachelor. Thankfully it's over now, but that was really, a conflict for me. So calendaring is also super important. I've noticed that a lot of students rely on their Canvas calendar and the to-do list in the calendar on Canvas. So that is really important, but it's also really important to make sure that they have their notifications on. And even if it's not a sound, at least having that red dot telling them, okay, this is something that you need to look at. And also then self-talk and visualization. We know that many times all students, especially students who are twice exceptional, who have these comorbid mental health diagnosis and are already feeling bad about themselves, who come to college and were maybe at the top of their class because, again, they were able to mask their disability, but now are struggling academically with the course load, the expectations. So for example, one study I read, a student was talking about how, they don't like to elaborate. When the professor asks them to write something, they give their reasons, they give their support, and they don't like to, what other students say, BS in their writing. And so then they're getting dinged for that because they're not explaining how they got from A to B. So that self-talk, oh, I'm not good at this, I'm never going to be good at this, I can't do it, helping students get away from that negative self-talk to positive self-talk. And then visualization, it kind of sounds hokey and what, but it actually does work. I have always been a believer in mind over matter, but there's research to suggest that having the student actually physically close their eyes and visualize, okay, this is what I need to do. Here are the steps to get there, visualizing it. And then the number one, those of you in education know about generalization. So if they're able to visualize completing one task for one assignment in one class, the more that they visualize, the more that they're able to generalize it to other classes and other situations, not just academic. And I believe that's all I have. So those are all the tips and tricks I have for you to support twice exceptional first gen students. So are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Millie. If you do have questions today, if you could post them in either the chat or the Q&A in the Whova app for this session, we will be responding to them from there. So there's a thank you for sharing so many specific strategies from
You're
Jamie
welcome.
Brenner.
Like I said, my whole thing is to everything I write, everything I do, I want to have a practitioner response to it. So it's really important for me to give you concrete examples to take with you.
And Rebecca has asked if you could share the articles that you referenced, if you have a bibliography.
Oh yeah, sure. I have them on my PowerPoint, so I can share my PowerPoint. I can upload it to Whova, right?
I believe so.
Right.
If you have any trouble, just send it to Chelsea or Denise and they'll get it uploaded, but I think you can.
Okay.
Uh,
But feel free to email me directly, mxr199, and I can send you that list as well.
There's another question from Tracy White who's asking which strategies you found to be the most impactful?
So in my personal experience and for what I'm doing right now, self-advocacy skills is probably the most important. I'm also very interested in self-determination, but that there's research to suggest starting that at a younger age. It's never too late though, but self-determination, helping students develop their autonomy is super important. But self-advocacy, what we know about twice exceptional students, especially those who have associated stigma with their disability diagnosis, they are not going to reach out. It's wonderful that we have all these supports and resources at Penn State, but we have to teach students how to access those resources. So, and also when they're talking with a professor. So for example, I have one student who reached out to professor and said, okay, here are my accommodations. And the professor said, okay, thank you. And one of them was extended time. So the professor said, I'd like to suggest that you just get the work done early, which is not. So, how does that student respond to that? They need to learn how to interact with people who are in higher authority to them. So those self-advocacy skills are super important.
So there's one question about how to help students who are in a classroom situation, and twice exceptional students in these situations will sometimes tend to keep to themselves and not really want to participate in a group process. How can you help them participate in group processes?
Yeah, so that's a huge struggle. Students who are twice exceptional, especially those who, so we need to recognize that the reason that they're not interested in those group projects or those group gatherings, whatever, is because of it's uncomfortable to be in that kind of a social situation when they don't know what their role is. So a lot of times professors will say, okay, just get in a group and, look at this question or, do this project, whatever, here's the project assignment. Also, if you are able to include roles for that assignment. So one person does this, one person does that, one person does the other thing. And then the student can say, oh, this is my role. And so now I feel more comfortable working with this group of people. But yeah, it's very difficult for students to want to work with a group because it's just hard.
There are a couple of other thank yous for sharing that they have students that they feel like this would be really helpful for.
Yeah.
These strategies are really helpful. So you talked just briefly about accommodations. Can you talk a little bit about how that sort of intersects with applying these strategies, or how just talk a little bit more about how that works for these students? I think that would be useful.
Yeah. And so I do want to say too that you may not even know that your student is twice exceptional unless they self-disclose or they come to you with accommodations. And so that's kind of where I was talking about the clues, if they're, and a lot of these strategies are pretty broad for students who are turning in things late or are not able to complete it 100%. When it comes to accommodations, that's where this cultural responsive part comes in, having those conversations with the student. And, a lot of times they know what their where their areas of growth is, what their strengths are. And so having that conversation with them to say, okay, what has worked for you in the past? And just drawing out those answers as much as you can, like with motivational interviewing. And what was I going to say? Not all accommodations work for all students. And so that's why I'm a huge advocate for individualized education plans in public school to be individualized. So And that's where I'm talking about the chunking. That's not a very common accommodation, but it's super helpful to students with ADHD. For students with autism, that social aspect, creating, and this is going above and beyond, but maybe the professor creating or encouraging students to create a group me or creating a time for students to get together and like a study group that's not just a TA, but it's more peer-based, like an LA instead. So yeah, accommodations for students who are twice exceptional really goes back to talking to the student and having those deep conversations about what helps them the most, what has helped them the most in the past, especially.
Thank you, Melanie. So I think those are all of the questions for today. Wait, one more. Do one just pop up? Yes. How can we collectively advocate for more systemic change that disadvantages twice exceptional students, like huge classes with grades based primarily on exams and really critical courses like math and science?
Yeah, I'm so grateful to that question because that is something that I wanted to address and I missed my notes when I was presenting. One of the things, the one opportunity we have to reach all students is through the first year seminar. And so one of the things that I'm going back to my magic wand from last year. If I had a magic wand, we'd have a 1 credit first year seminar that was maybe 5 weeks and 3 times during the semester. So we'd capture all of the students within 6 seminars throughout the first year and teach them all of these integrated study skills, all of these resources available on campus, just all the different things that we want them to know. There's this author, Gary Howard, who wrote a book called "We Can't Teach What We Don't Know." And it's so true. We need to take on that first gen twice exceptional lens and address it there. And I would love to see that happen at Penn State, where the student just for the 5 short weeks, talk about, okay, this is the study skills you need in order to succeed.
Well, thank you so much, Millie. We are at our time today. Thank you to our attendees. We really appreciate your presence and your time and your great questions today. If you would please go back into Whova, and there is a rate session button to give some feedback. And just another reminder that all of these sessions will be available for the next 3 months in Whova. You'll have access and you can go back in and rewatch these. But thanks so much, Millie. This was great.
Thank you. And thank you for the feedback. I see the little emojis going up there.
Thank you all for
everybody.
coming.